All right. Um, my name's Sam Holeman. I am the president of the Fire Alarm Divisions at Battalion 1 Fire Protection. And today I'm going to go over NFPA 72, National Fire Alarm and Signaling Code, Chapter 14, which covers inspection, test, and maintenance. And I have a slideshow I'm going to share with you. Let's see how this goes. Is that working? There we go. Hopefully that you can see that. Is that the Bay Bridge? Everyone can see that?
Yes, we can.
Great. Yeah, so I'm president of the Fire Alarm Division, Battalion 1 Fire Protection. We're a full service fire protection company based out of San Leandro. We do fire alarms, fire sprinklers, fire extinguisher, hood systems, clean agent systems, basically anything fire protection related we do. We also offer high-rise fire safety director services. Um, and we serve mostly the greater Bay Area, but also Northern California, parts of the Central Valley. And we specialize in service, ITM, which is what I'll be talking about today. We also do installation as well, but service is really our specialty. Inspections, troubleshooting, and fixing systems. So my background is fire protection and code compliance. I've been in code signage and evacuation maps for about 26 years. I actually had a graphic design background, but pretty early on in my career, I started doing code signage for municipalities, utilities, property management companies, and quite a few evacuation maps. So I'd work on these evacuations and I would talk to these fire alarm vendors about what the fire alarm sounded like, what it looked like. I get floor plans from building engineers. Um, I did that for a number of years, and the property management companies would come to me and say, um, we have this notice of violation from the fire department. Can you help us? And a lot of times it was signage related. They're missing signs or whatnot. So I'd add those, and they would ask me, well, can you help us out on any of these other things? So I'd read these notice of violations, um, and I said, well, it looks like you have a fire alarm deficiency or a sprinkler deficiency. Why don't you go to your fire alarm vendor and we'll get it fixed, and then I can help you put together a records binder, and then we'll talk to the fire department and make sure you're in compliance. And so they started to ask me to do that more and more. And I said, well, I really should look and see if there's a certification out there that can help me with these, because sometimes they even wanted me to run fire drills, but I didn't really have much fire alarm background. So I found the high-rise fire safety director course in San Francisco, and I took that in 2012. And about the same time, I got introduced to Battalion 1 Fire Protection, and I joined them as their fire safety director and also became a fire alarm technician. So I worked as a fire alarm technician doing troubleshoots and testing, inspection, testing and maintenance. And I would also run fire drills. And then I lit my certificate lapse. Well, actually, I knew I had to renew it, but it I missed the renewal course, and I think I even emailed Tom, who you'll be talking to later, and I retook his course, which was great. So I did that at City College in 2017, and I haven't let it lapse since. I made sure I renew it. And still to this day, I do perform fire safety director services. And then since I was at Battalion 1, after 3 or 4 years of being a technician, I became a service manager. I did that for a number of years, and now I oversee the entire fire alarm division, which oversees installs and service and inspections. Let's see, next screen. So yeah, so today we're going to talk about the NFPA 72, Chapter 14, ITM. Basically, this is everything that I do is based off of NFPA 72 as a fire alarm vendor. This book defines how often we test devices, how we test it, and who can test it. This is all Chapter 14. First off, 14.2, you got inspections. And inspections actually mean visual checks. There's different frequencies of inspections. Typically, when a fire alarm vendor comes out, we usually do the fire alarm annuals and a semi-annual, but there's actually visual requirements for that as well. And so we don't have to actually activate anything, but we're looking for issues of devices that, are they damaged? Maybe they got obstructed. Maybe someone put tape on them, or they covered them up. Have they been altered? Are they still there? We're looking for any issues. And a lot of times, just from a visual inspection, you could tell that doesn't look right. We should probably get the fire alarm company out to look at it, service it. Even in this photo right here, you can see there's a missing ceiling tile. So that smoke detector is not going to do much good, because when the smoke comes up, it's going to go right into that cavity and into the ceiling, and it might not activate it as soon as it's designed to. Um, you know, so that's an issue right there that we could pick up on a visual inspection. Additional visual inspections, we're looking at the control units, which is your fire panels, your annunciators. Um, is it in trouble? Is the power on? Is there supervisory? Maybe it's an alarm and it's silenced, or something's bypassed. Just visually checking to make sure everything should be in the green and normal on those panels. Batteries too. We'll test the batteries twice a year, but we're looking in, especially with seal lead acid, they could start to bulge or corrode, or something's going on with those. We want to make sure that those are operating properly to properly back up the systems in the event of a power outage. Another issue here is these are some older batteries. These are dated 2017. Per code, we have to label not only when the batteries were manufactured, but when they were installed. And typically, we'll replace them every 3 years. Notification appliances, visual inspection, making sure they're still there, they're not falling off the walls. Duct detectors, that's a tricky one, because you can't always see them. But when you can, if you're checking out your air handler units, um, or if you have exposed ceilings, just making sure that they're still there. Those tend to have a lot of problems with dust, soot, uh, water intrusion. It's just a dirty environment a lot of times. So just making sure that those are still in the green and they're attached properly to the ducts and HVAC units, as well as CO detectors. So testing, this is actually a typical device we use. It's called a solo pole. We'll introduce smoke into the chamber, and it tests the smoke, and then we'll make sure that it reports back to the fire panel. Um, we always want to use smoke. Magnets are not acceptable means of testing. Some devices allow you to test with a magnet, but that's not a true test. We want to simulate how the device is actually supposed to function. So we'll use smoke. This actually tester also can do heat. So we'll test the heat element as well. Um, on the annual fire alarm, we're testing everything possible. Ideally, we're testing 100% of the system. So that's smokes, COs, water flows, uh, tampers, uh, tampers being any sprinkler control valves, butterflies, PIVs. We're load testing batteries, um, you name it. Ground faults. So we really want to get in there and just test the full system, everything possible. We're verifying that it's functioning as designed. Let's see what else. And then we got semi-annuals. Semi-annuals will test water flows, tampers, batteries. We're making sure the system's communicating right with the central station. And then we'll also perform a number of visual checks while we're out there checking all those devices. So the semi-annuals are less obtrusive. We don't have to set off bells or horns or strobes or speakers, but we do want to flow water and make sure that the sprinkler system is functioning properly. And then there's maintenance. So that'd be 14.4. Um, there's regular maintenance that's required. It's mandated. And usually the recommendation of that is from the manufacturer. So we're cleaning them. When we're doing our visual checks or we're testing, we might see dust collecting on the heads, especially if they're near an HVAC duct or duct detectors. They tend to get pretty dirty, so we can blow them out with air. Or if it's too far gone, then we'll replace them. Calibration is required on some devices. It's not typical. Most of today's devices don't require calibration, but when you get to CO detection, some of those will require it. And then any failed devices that we pick up during these inspections, we want to make sure that they're repaired, replaced, or troubleshot. Records, 14.5. is a critical section. Um, Records being the report that we produce when we test all the systems. It has to have the date, description of the device that was tested, the results, did it pass or fail? If there's any corrective actions, let's say, device doesn't activate, or um, it's fallen off the wall, or whatever it may be. We'll put notes in there saying, what the corrective action is, and then we have to have the technician's name and our company name on these reports. And then we'll want to keep those reports in the document box. We'll also email them to you, but usually below the fire panel, we like to have the as-built fire alarm plans, as well as past test records in those document boxes. So it helps us not only when we go back and troubleshoot later, but also when you have your annual inspections with your AHJs. When they come out, they want to see all those records. A lot of those records too will also be put in a records binder, because it gets kind of, these doc boxes are only so big, but um, annual, a list of all the devices, and especially those as builts, and at the very minimum, a fire alarm riser diagram of your devices is always helpful. They tend to get lost. Yeah, records and retention. Minimum 1 year for pretty much everything. I like to keep them for 3 to 5 years. It really depends on the HJ, and how thick your binder gets. And so when the binder gets too thick, a lot of times I'll take the stuff that's beyond 3 years and move that to a separate binder, because I want to maintain those records. And then, but I want that binder as organized as possible. So when the AHJ comes out, he could look at it. It's tabbed, it's nice, it's organized. And the better and more organized you are with your records, the smoother the inspections tend to go, because that's usually the first thing when the inspectors come out and look at these. Um, for your buildings, they'll look at this binder, and if the binder's a mess and it's out of date, and you can't find stuff, and things are in sleeves, then that's going to be kind of an indication of how the building's maintained. So I think the records binder is really important um, on being maintained properly. Um, Another thing we run into a lot, so we go out, we test all the smokes, horns and strobes, water flows, like I talked before. Well, now with these systems, especially on high rises and more complex buildings, newer construction, there's a lot of integrated systems that aren't being tested properly. So the integrated systems such as the ERCs, uh, area refuge two-way communication, clean agent systems like FM200, uh, halon systems, in the server rooms. We got pre-actions, EPOs, HVACs, fire smoke dampers, elevators. A lot of that stuff gets bypassed. We'll test elevators, the smokes, but we're not testing elevator recall unless the elevator recall company is there. So it takes a lot of coordination with property management, building engineers, and us to make sure we all get out there at the same time. Ideally, it all happens at the same time, but we kind of have to talk to each other and make sure it goes right. So maybe the first 2 days we're going into units, and the next day we're testing common areas, and then the fourth day it'd be a nice day to have HVAC out there and the elevator company out there. That way we could test all these systems properly for shutdown. Do they start back up properly? A lot of times, sometimes we've tested elevators and no one has the elevator key. That's usually why we want the elevator company there, because then it's impacting the tenants of the building. So those are all systems that take additional coordination. That on reports, what I've seen is bypassed because the vendor's not there, which is kind of a problem. There's a reason these systems are all integrated into each other. It's all life safety systems, and we want to make sure they work properly, and then what to do to reset them, when they are activated. And then we also have, yeah. Oh, let's see here. Oh, yeah. So what engineers should watch out for? We're looking out for repeated troubles and supervisory signals on the fire panel. If those keep happening, if you could take a photo of them, document them. Monitoring will get them. The fire alarm company that monitors it should also be getting notices. But since you're on site and you're seeing what's happened, it really helps with troubleshooting if we can identify what that trouble signal or supervisor is, especially if it's intermittent. It might come in um, ground fault, or maybe there's a certain device that kind of goes into trouble or supervisory, and then it clears on its own. And then you call the fire alarm vendor out. We go out, we're checking history, we're trying to figure it out. If you can capture what that is, or maybe that address is, it's going to help us narrow down where it is. Another more stuff to look out for is our devices getting blocked by furniture or storage or renovations. A lot of times I'll see plants in front of pull stations, or someone moves some bookshelf and they're obstructing access. Usually it's a pull station, but any fire alarm device that's obstructed, um, that could happen, by your tenants. Was there any recent construction that wasn't coordinated with the fire alarm vendor? Maybe someone put up a new wall or opened up a ceiling that could impact the design of the fire alarm and its functionality. So, we want to make sure if any changes are made to a unit that fire alarm vendors are involved. Water leaks. You might have a water leak and it fixes, but then like a week later we're having some troubles. Well, it might have got into the fire alarm system and now we have some corrosion going on. So maybe it's still working, but that corrosion gets worse and now we have this trouble. So we always want to know, especially if I'm coming out on a service call. Um, that's the first thing I'll ask. Have you had any construction? Have you had any leaks? And then, oh yeah, like over in unit, 305, like we had this leak. It's like, great. Well, let me go start there and kind of see, because even if it's not in 305, it might have made its way through conduit or kind of snaked its way to another area, but that's always a great place to start. And then also missing or outdated fire alarm records. Um, you know, Maybe we're emailing a person that no longer works with your organization the fire alarm report, and you need it. Just checking on those record binders and making sure everything's up to date. And if you ever need it, we'll get it to you. And then unlabeled devices or mismatched as-built drawings. So as-builts are key. I mentioned that earlier. Um, a lot of times it's hard to get, especially on older buildings, and we'll even recreate our own riser diagrams. But having the devices labeled and and those as-built drawings really helps. And then we also have vendors working on integrated system without coordination. So that's another one too. So maybe they're not working on the fire alarm system, but they're working on the ERC system or the two-way communication, and things are being changed. That needs to be coordinated with property management, building engineers, fire alarm vendor, and then whatever that integrated system is. We want to make sure that that integrated system is working properly with the fire alarm system. So that is about what I have. Um, are there any questions?
Do you guys work on any of the systems that are UL like monitored by like UL rated systems that are monitored? So like if you get a trouble, then they're required to dispatch a technician. Uh, what's your experience been with that?
Yeah, so we do. So we're UL. Um, Typically, we don't. We'll call first and say, "Hey, you got a trouble," especially if there's someone out there, and then we can dispatch a technician. So we're 24/7 service. So if we need to send someone out, we can. But if there's someone already on site and they can kind of look at it and see what's going on, that's the main thing, is like responding to what the issue is. So is it a trouble? Is it supervisory?
Yeah.
But we do offer runner service, but it gets tricky because then we're charging the customer a lot of money for just like sending a random tech out. And so ideally we try to work with whoever's on site, property management or building engineers with those.
Yeah, that's been our experience. We have EST, so our company they'll have technicians that don't work on EST, and they'll send them after hours, and there's basically nothing they can do besides check a really obvious thing like try to hit the reset on the panel. So yeah, I think it's really kind of coordinating with the on-site team to see what can be done, and then often most things get accomplished during normal business hours when you have your best techs available and programming technicians who can really get in and troubleshoot.
Yeah, it's tricky. And in my case too, I answer most of the emergency after hours calls, and I'll dispatch our technicians. So that way they'll come to me first, and I'm familiar with most of our properties, and I'll talk to them. I'll say, all right, let's do this to triage it, and I'll gather information, and then I'll prep this. If we do decide to dispatch, I'll prep that technician with as much information as possible, uh, so that it's not just some random guy that's blind in the dark. And I also say, is this really an emergency call that dictates, this is a low battery. We're not going to be able to replace the battery in the middle of the night. So, and we don't want to charge overtime rates either. So,
Yeah, I think, and there's, a difference between maybe like a monitor point or a trouble versus like a supervisory where, maybe it warrants a more prompt action. Maybe someone's closed a valve or shut off the fire pump or something like that. So, okay, yeah, well, that's kind of what I would hope for in a service vendor as well, is kind of communication and using the resources to the best of our abilities.
yeah.
And then we'll also have questions at the end of the session, but Tom, did you want to kick us off on your part?
Okay. Thank you, Sam. That was good. Just a comment about Sam real quick. There's a ratio of maintenance versus damage repair, and it's stated that $1 in maintenance saves $100 in damage repairs. So you can quickly do some math that if you have $1,000 worth of maintenance, that's saving $100,000 in damage repair. So companies like Sam are good to have around because buildings have become incredibly complex in today's modern high-rise buildings. So it oftentimes exceeds the training that engineers might be receiving. So I want to lead off by saying that anything I might say, comments, my opinions are my own. They do not reflect that of Local 39. I teach there. I teach the high-rise training program, and I have been teaching at Local 39 for 25 years. I recognize a bunch of your names. I think, Toby, you were in my class. And I also teach a fire pump prep class to prepare engineers to take the state fire marshal's fire pump certification test. Now, the fire safety director program really starts with the facility emergency plan, and that's critical to the overall success of the safety of the building. That should not be simply a broad brush, quick, get it done, meet the requirements of the local fire protection bureau. It really needs to represent your building, the fire life safety systems within your building, and the occupancy of your building. Is it primarily elderly people? Are there children? Is it the ones who come in by their EV bikes and scooters, 20 and 30-year-olds who have a different attitude towards safety than maybe older people do, versus doctors, lawyers, stockbrokers who have a tendency to ignore fire alarms? So your facility emergency plan need to reflect that. It's supposed to be approved by the local fire district. And the way it's supposed to operate, and it has in San Francisco for many years, is when the plan is submitted, an inspector reviews it, signs off on it, dates it, and stamps it approved. And that's part of the legal document that the property should be maintaining. Just as proof, should there ever be a liability issue and the building has to go to court, that they have an approved plan. That's not universally done in all areas of the Bay Area. I worked with San Francisco for 31 years. I consider it probably a B minus fire department, to be candid. But when I went to City of San Mateo for 6 years, I was a bit shocked by the lack of experience and fire experience that San Mateo had. Now, that's a reflection of the income of the area, the value of the properties. People really take care of their properties. They're higher educated. That all relates to fire loss. But the experience level of the firefighters was substantially lower than what I would expect in San Francisco, of course, or Oakland. Oakland gets its share of fires, but wealthy areas, you don't want to see fires. Hillsborough had one fire during my 6 years with San Mateo, and I responded to it, and it was a laundry room fire. Probably $100,000 laundry room fire, but that was their fire for the year. So these are departments that the properties really need to pay attention to their fire life safety systems and to their facility emergency plan and their floor warden training. Now, the oddity in the fire code, high-rise buildings over 75 feet are required to have a facility emergency plan. Floor wardens, unless they are full evacuation. Public address system, once again, older buildings might not have that, so they're automatically a full evacuation building. The dilemma occurs because, like in San Mateo County where I live, there's a great many apartment buildings being built anywhere from 5 to 6 floors, but lower than the high-rise fire code requirement for all those features of a certified fire safety director, a plan, floor wardens, and what have you. Now, in the fire code, it says there's supposed to be emergency procedures written for those buildings. However, that's not enforced. So if you're a property manager in a building that's less than a high-rise building, I would encourage you to try to create a emergency procedures for your tenants and your staff so they know how to react in emergency. Most people don't. When we look at emergencies, only about 10 to 15% of the population of any particular building actually reacts properly, where they immediately evacuate or immediately relocate in relocation buildings. Another 10 to 15% will kind of go crazy. They panic, they might cry, they get angry, they shut down, they don't do anything. The overwhelming majority of people pretty much don't do anything. They're looking for guidance, guidance by security staff, engineering staff, and floor warden staff. So there I'm going to comment about the annual fire drill. The annual fire drill is supposed to be a rehearsal for the real event. Oftentimes in my classes, I ask how many people go to the rehearsal of a symphony or an opera. Nobody raises their hand because they don't do that. They go to the real event. Well, the fire drill is supposed to represent the real event. And the problem is many staff, whether it's property management, security, and engineering, don't take the fire drill seriously. I oftentimes talk with property management staff. How do you notify tenants that there's going to be a fire drill? Oh, we send out emails. Do you get response? Well, not really. Well, I encourage them, you have to make face-to-face contact. There should be a property tenant relations person that actually goes up and meets with their various tenants and informs them, hopefully as part of their lease contract, that they will participate in the annual fire drill. It's actually a law in the state of California. Los Angeles enforces it with a fine for those people who don't participate. When I suggested that to the city of San Francisco fire marshal, he kind of laughed at me and says, Tom, we don't do that. We're kumbaya, kumbaya. So that's up to the property management. How are you going to enforce it? You need to critique your fire drill, find out who's participating, who's not participating. Because in reality, it can become a liability for the property owner management should people claim that they didn't participate because they weren't trained. They weren't really told that they had to leave the building. They might have just hid out in their office building. So property management needs to try to hire back extra staff to really monitor the success of your fire drill. Now, with that comment, I want to make, in my opinion, engineering knows your fire life safety systems much more than security does, much more than property management does. That's their job. That's their task. They should be in charge of the emergency operations of your building when the building goes into alarm. They know the fire panel they should be familiar with, and most of them do, know their fire control room. They know how to operate the public address system. They can identify when there's a sprinkler flow, and they can determine whether it's a misuse by somebody with popcorn or a toaster oven in South of Market in San Francisco, two guys were actually playing hack and sack, and they caused a sprinkler head to activate. So your property management, or excuse me, your engineering team should be able to address that, see that it's not really a fire. And here I'm going to say something that the fire marshal doesn't want to hear. Shut down the sprinkler head and drain it, because part of the purpose of your property, of your security, excuse me, your engineering department is to prevent property damage. Now, when the fire units get on the scene, they might scold the engineer, say, you shouldn't shut it down until we arrive. Well, just say, well, we're just trying to prevent property damage, because water oftentimes can cause more property damage than the fire itself. So you need a trained, well-versed engineering team that can respond quickly, identify what's going on, identify whether it's a false alarm, and that does occur, or whether it's a real event, and what action is going to take after that. I encourage property management people to get out and actually away from their desk and walk with engineers and realize what they do. I once was told many, many years ago by an assistant property manager at 100 Pine Street in San Francisco. She's no longer there. She's actually a big boss for a major company. And she says, all my engineers do is change light bulbs. Well, I knew the engineers, I knew the building, a very, very well-maintained, safe building. I said, you need to get out of your office and track your engineer, find out what they're doing and the tasks that they're accomplishing and the difficulties they have, because they're doing a lot more than what you think. And she did that, much to her credit. And she very much appreciated what engineering is doing. And guess what? She works for a major engineering company on the Western United States now. Now, I commented about office fire drills and the necessity for hiring back staff to critique whether it's a full evacuation or relocation. But conduct a critique afterwards. Meet with your floor wardens. Get their opinions about what went well, what did not go well. Did they hear the fire alarm? Did they hear the public address system? And then meet, secondly, with your staff. Don't want to meet with them both together. Your tenants might be critical of your staff, and staff might be critical of the tenants. So meet with them separately and come up with a plan for how you're going to address that fire drill, the success of it. I do know that there's buildings in San Francisco that when they have a drill that they did not think was successful, they actually conducted a secondary drill several months later. So keep that in mind. Property management should not be hesitant to send a letter to that particular tenant that's not participating. You're protecting the owner from liability, from tenants not complying with the alarm and the public address system. So you want to put them on notice that they're being watched. Now, a couple of things are taking place in San Francisco. One is called BIC, Building Information Card. San Francisco has required it actually last year as a law. It's being implemented. It's not so much for the tenants as it is for the fire department or police responders, a copy of which is supposed to be kept in the fire control room or fire panel. It explains all the details from the roof to the basement of the building. So when that incident commander comes in, they can get a quick picture of this building. I work with a 1926 building, limited sprinklers, open stairway. It doesn't have a fire pump, it has a booster pump. Your incident commander wants to know those details. There's only 2 ways out of that building. Well, 3, the elevators, right? Which is a no-no, not supposed to use the elevators. But this building is so old, the elevators don't recall when the building goes into alarm. Can you imagine that? They have the open stairway. That's obviously not safe. That's an open chimney for any smoke and heat that's going up the chimney. So they have fire escapes. Now, the average age of that building is probably 70 years old. And I tell them, if anything, you get out onto that fire escape, don't try and walk down. just stay on that balcony, wait for the firefighters to come up and assist you. The point of that is the incident commander needs to know those things. And that's what the BIC program does. It's actually in the California Fire Code. And I encouraged the fire marshal to adopt it, which they did. And now that's the law in San Francisco. I encourage buildings, if it's not going to be a requirement by your local fire jurisdiction, that you consider doing it yourself. You can actually email me and I'll send you the program that San Francisco has adopted to create a BIC program. Now, in my high-rise classes, I require a homework assignment of my engineers, mostly engineers. We very seldom get security or property managers in the Local 39 classes. It's called Facility Features PowerPoint. So part of the homework is the engineer will prepare a PowerPoint showing photos and what the photos show, whether it's the chiller up on the roof, the backup generator, where the fire pump is, stairways, anything that has to do with the building, sprinkler shutoff valves, natural gas shutoff, electrical shutoffs. All these features in the building are put into a PowerPoint that can be printed out and put in the fire binder, which is required in San Francisco to be in the fire control room. Once again, for the fire department or police to be able to quickly get an assessment of the features of that building. Now, there's a secondary issue. There are buildings that could be anywhere, like the Salesforce building, 62 stories, San Francisco 555 California, 52 stories. These can take months for an engineer or a security person to learn those buildings. When you have the building features PowerPoint where they can actually page through it and see the features on the roof to the basement, it's a quicker learning process to know their own buildings. I used to go into a downtown building that went into alarm, and I meet the security, excuse me, at 3 a.m. in the morning. And I said, "What's going on?" "I don't know." That was the common answer. Well, what does it show in the fire control room?" "I don't know. I never go in there." Well, here I'm going to lead into something, excuse me, which some engineers find controversial. I don't. If you don't have engineers at night, but you have a security person protecting your multi-million-dollar building, and you have security that don't know anything about your building or the fire control room, where the fire pump is, and other features, why are you hiring people who know nothing? In my opinion, security should be trained by engineering to know the features in the fire control room. They should be able to operate a public address system. They should know where the fire pump room is and at least direct the firefighters to the fire pump room. It's not that difficult to start a fire pump when it's not operating during an incident, and it should be operating. But systems don't always operate the way they should be, right, Sam? So security, in my opinion, once again, should be able to go into that fire control room and press the green button that says start. Because the engineer might be anywhere from 15 to an hour away from the building to respond back after hours. And what about weekends and holidays? So property management team, even if it's a contract security, it's your building. You pay for that contract. Security companies don't really train their security people other than the California Guard Card, which is an online basic security program. And some of those buildings don't even require that, which is amazing to me, but that's the case. Once again, you get what you pay for, and you pay a lot more for what the damages that are going to occur when you have a security person that doesn't know anything about your building. I responded to a building with engine 13 on California Street, major water leak. I went down in the basement trying to feel the water going through the valves to shut off necessary valves. I'm sure the engineers the next morning didn't appreciate that because I probably shut off a dozen valves. Well, if the security person kind of knew the building more than what we knew, he could have isolated the problem or at least advised us how to do that ourselves as the fire responders. So I just put that out there to property managers. Let your engineers do what they're supposed to do, but teach your security the basic operations of basic things. Now they can get on the cell phone and call the engineer for advice as they're doing something, or even for confirmation that they're allowed to do something. I think that's appropriate. So some thoughts that should be discussed. Now, I want to comment about fire drills. There was an incident that took place in Chicago in 2003. 21 people died. There was a stairway leading out of the building, the area. It was a nightclub. It's called the E2 nightclub above the Epitome restaurant on Michigan Avenue in Chicago. Surprisingly, the after action report showed that most people died at the top of the stairway rather than the bottom of the stairway, where we can anticipate people crowding, falling, that type of thing. Well, the reality is the stairway wasn't quickly identifiable. The staff in the restaurant didn't know how to direct people. Now, you might be thinking as a property manager, is that my responsibility to advise restaurants and bars to train their staff to identify where an exit is? Well, I think it's something that property managers should ask. How many of you have been on the Starlight Room at the top of the Sir Francis Drake, which is now a different name, hotel, has changed hands? I've asked that for 5 years and nobody can say where the stairways are. And it's always crowded up there. And is this an ideal situation where if they have an incident there, you're going to have fatalities? As a property manager, I would want to make sure that I've commented with the restaurant or bar staff. Have you trained your staff as to identifying where stairs are when your floor goes into alarm? That should be basic operations. So something to think about. Now, residential. It's commented when you go online that it could take 19 to 28 minutes to clear a residential apartment building. A lot of that has to do with the fact that people aren't familiar with evacuation and fire drills in residential. Residential high rises are not exempt from a fire drill. The problem is the fire department is just catching on to that in San Francisco, and they're sending in inspectors to look at the records, which is about time. 4 or 5 years ago, they weren't doing that. They're only doing it in commercial office buildings. But then we come back to the lower, non-high-rise residential buildings of 5, 6 stories. I visited one in my community in San Mateo County. Absolutely marvelous, fantastic building. The gym is better than most gyms that are open commercially. They have lounges. They have other spaces for tenants to chill out. Long, long hallways. Stairways at either end. But I asked the property management who asked me to come and give my comments. When did you last have a fire drill? Oh, we're supposed to do that? Well, you have a district fire inspector that doesn't necessarily come into your building. By law, they go into high-rise buildings, but not necessarily buildings that are less than a high-rise building. But then I come back to the law, which is not enforced anywhere, as I know in state of California, that there's supposed to be emergency procedures. And what's wrong with property management doing an annual fire drill? Try to get some level of participation. Remember, once again, you're there to protect your tenants and protect your owner from liability. So give that some thought. When we look at 9/11, classic example of things that didn't go well. Of course, the majority of people could not evacuate. They were above the crash site of that incident. One of the high-rise buildings actually had a viable stairway after the crash site, but the word didn't get out to those people because PA systems were compromised. But the average time span for somebody to react to the alarm and even to the fire after impact was 20 minutes. 20 minutes to react to what they knew something significant had taken place. And there's the dilemma. Your floor wardens are guides. They're there to direct people. They need to be able to take charge, be assertive, and you as a property manager, you can't select them, but can you try to recruit them? You know your tenants. You know who would be a good floor warden and who might not be. Sometimes I see the newest employee who might be the receptionist is picked to be the floor warden because nobody else wants to do it. And that receptionist doesn't really feel like they have the authority to tell people, hey, you got to get up and leave. So give some thought to your selection process of your floor wardens and the team that's going to support the floor wardens, from exit monitors, elevator monitors, and people who are going to be aides, assistants to those who have disabilities. Those are important positions. And you need people who are going to be able to react. Now, we look at airplanes, FAA studies. When a plane crashes, everybody not having ever been in a plane crash think, oh, I'm going to die. No, the statistics actually say 50% or more of the people can survive on an airplane crash. It's not 100%. The problem is people don't react. And FAA studies of planes that do catch fire after they crash, you have 90 seconds to get up, identify an exit way, and immediately go to that exit to get out. The problem is, all of you have been on an airplane. How many people actually pull out the instructions on where the exits are and what actions to take should that plane have an emergency event? Probably close to zero. Zero. My habit is, partly because I'm Dr. Doom and I'm thinking about what could happen all the time, I'm looking at the closest exit way and who's sitting in those exit ways. By law, the flight attendant is supposed to go to them and say, can you remove that 60-pound exit door? I think I can. They can't do that. So I look at the second exit way. Where is it? How many seats back? And I look at who's sitting in those exits. And I realize for 37 years in the fire service, I went to help people to save their lives. Well, in an airplane crash, you can't really do that. You have 90 seconds for yourself to get out and grab people as you go. But to stand up and be the person who's going to direct, that opportunity really isn't there, to be candid with you. So take care of yourself, try and take care of those immediately around you, and boogie out. Problem is, and some airlines are starting to catch on. There was an airplane, I think it was in Texas, where everybody's going for their overhead luggage when the airplane had just crashed. And the flight attendants had to fight with them, argue with them, leave that behind, throw it on the seat. You don't have time to grab overhead luggage. Now some airlines will actually fine people for doing that. And it's about time. Okay, I think I've taken a bit of time. I'm going to open up to, two things. Where to take the Fire Safety Director program. You can take it at City College. The price has really gone up, about $595 for the 27-hour program. You're going to get a certificate that's valued for 5 years. The class is on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. and you can go online to apply through City College. If you're a Local 39 member, you can take the training program at Local 39, and there's 3 classes. I teach typically Wednesday nights. I won't be teaching again until the fall, but there's a class on Monday from 11 to 2, and a class Monday nights from 5 to 8 p.m. Now, there's a third option, and I offer this to buildings for site training. I offer a 4.5-day class. It's 27 hours. There is homework and there is quizzes. So there's one class per week of 6 hours. So there's 2 sessions per week for 4 weeks and one final 5th week of 3 hours. Some buildings like that because, one, we're able to walk around and look at their building, look at their fire control room, look at their sprinkler shutoffs, and where the fire pump room is, and actually do some other things in their own building. So that's an option. I've done that with major corporations, Visa Corporation. I've done it with Chase Warrior Center, Tenderloin Development Corporation, PG&E, and some other companies that wanted an on-site class for their staff. Plus, you can invite other buildings to attend that as well. I did that at the UC Berkeley president's office. They invited some people who are outside the UC system to attend the class. So something to consider. So that's 3 ways to get your certification. Okay. Jesse, any questions?
If anyone has any questions, I think I saw maybe a couple in the chat earlier. Feel free to ask both Sam and Tom with the time that we have left.
And just to finish up, my email is firelifesafety.murray, MURRAY @gmail.
Thank you, Tom.
That was firelifesafety.murray@gmail.
Yes. Yes.
I'm going to put that in the chat now for everybody else. I'll be sending you an email about that BIC sample. We'd like to do that here.
Right.
I also have a fillable PDF that you could use for the BIC. So the part with all the text, you can fill it out, but on the back side, you definitely have to have someone like draw those risers and floor plans.
Yeah. Oh, so Sam, you're familiar with it. Good.
Yeah. Here, actually, I could share one if you want me to show one. I have one up on my screen.
Yeah.
You want to see it?
That'd be great.
Yeah, let's see. I have a couple of them here.
And then also, Sam, you can feel free to send it to me, and then I can send it out to all of the registrants as well.
Okay.
So they have a PDF on hand if needed.
So I usually do these in 11x17, and then we'll laminate them, and then I'll hang them right next to the fire panel, so that way they could just pull it. And then I also put another hard copy in the facility emergency plan as backups. But this one is for 1001 Pine. So I'll zoom in a little bit here. So these are all fillable things so you can put in, contact information and where shutoffs are located and all the descriptions and whatnot. It's pretty versatile. And then what we'll do is we'll draw a real simple version of where the standpipes are located, where the shutoffs are, elevators. Some of these get a little more complicated, especially when you have mechanical rooms on different floors, but it's meant to be a quick reference guide, not so much of an exact floor 2-scale floor plan. Let's see, here's another one that I did. This is for 1025 Fillmore. Same thing. We have some retail here. So I actually added some water shutoff locations, which I don't know, Tom, is that required to have like the utility shutoffs on there as well?
Well, it's a good idea to have like your standpipes. Are they dry or wet? That's helpful. Uh, and sprinkler shutoff valves, because once again, if the building's not familiar with it, we as fire try to locate the shutoffs, because sometimes the shutoffs, there's two on each floor, or there might be one circular shutoff. So we want to be able to identify those as quick as possible.
And this one has standpipes on both risers. Yeah, but I'm not indicating here if they're dry or wet, so that'd be a good thing to add. But yeah, I could send this. I could send out an example. I'll send it to Jesse.
Thank you.
And the other thing, Sam, you might consider sending out to people is an explanation of what the ERCS system is. I've been in some buildings and they have ERCS, but the staff, the engineering staff, didn't even know what they were, and how they operate.
Yeah, I definitely could do that. And San Francisco's really they've really stepped up their inspections recently to make sure that they have enunciators that are tied into the fire panel in the lobbies. I've noticed a lot more inspections specifically on those systems because a lot of them were put in and then they haven't been tested on a regular basis, kind of like the fire alarm systems.
Right. And the other dilemma is, and to be candid, San Mateo is a good little fire department. They have smart people, physically capable, but lack experience, and their fire prevention bureau is subpar, to say the least. So that's when the buildings themselves have to step up and make sure you have a maintenance engineering staff that know what they're doing. And if you don't have that, hire Sam.
Okay, any last questions or? Okay. So I think this will conclude our first engineer webinar of the year. Thank you both, Tom and Sam. It was a great presentation. And for everyone who attended, if you would like to review what they discussed today, I'll be posting the video either by end of day or by morning tomorrow, and I'll notify everyone once it's up and available. And then I'll make sure to connect with Sam to get I think it was the BIC and the ERC system PDF that you guys were discussing, so I can send that out to you guys as well. But thank you for attending, and yeah, that concludes our first one of the year.
All right.
Great job. That was awesome. Good job, guys. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks a lot, guys.
guys.
Have a
Great
great day.
presentation.
Had a good time. All right.
Sam,